Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host Sree Iyer. Today we have a slightly different format. We have Abhijit Iyer-Mitra as our guest host, and he's going to be talking to Suhel Seth on Diaper Boy. And to know a little bit more about this, you perhaps have seen our trailer and you want to really understand where things are going as far as the Congress party is concerned and its young leader, Rahul Gandhi. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over control to Abhijit. Abhijit, take it away, sir, and it's all yours.
The problem with Rahul is he thinks his jokes are funny. And it often happens when you actually believe in your own, charisma and intellect, and then you believe whatever you're saying is funny. Actually, it boomerangs. Because sometimes a joke is very important when it is done contextually and when it hits its mark. There's nothing worse than a bad joke. I mean, the only thing worse than a bad joke is losing an election repeatedly. So, Rahul Gandhi, to my mind, needs to worry about the kind of statesmanship he wants to exude. And I think you raised a very, very important point. You cannot beat Modi by being Modi version 2.0. I mean, that's the stupidest thing to do. Yeah. In good old marketing, we say brands either compete or one brand shifts the battleground. You can't say, oh, I'll be a whiter surf or a whiter tide. You then shift the battleground. Say, I have, ABC components. The problem is, Rahul Gandhi is trying to play Modi on Modi's turf. He will never succeed. Modi is a consummate politician. He's a brilliant communicator, and he knows the pulse of his audience. Why? Because he lives, travels, works within them. See, these are hardworking people. You may or may not agree with the BJP ideology, but you can never fault them for hard work and their commitment to their ideology. The Congress, on the other hand, is seen as a cool, people like us, people like you kind of party. They are friends that you can have. That doesn't win you elections because you're out of touch with the people, as it were. And then the utterances that you make are formed out of your kitty party circle or your cocktail drinking circle or your shopping together at Khan Market circle. Now look at what Rahul Gandhi did initially. And he did a brilliant thing. He got Soot Boot Ki Sarkar to stick to Modi. Yes. And it was a vicious and a brilliant move on the part of Rahul Gandhi. See, you have to give Rahul Gandhi credit for some of the stuff. He's made it stick. Mm-hmm. Then he went on to this whole thing of, Indian oligarchs, blah, blah, blah. Point I'm making is he doesn't know how to stay the course. He's like a ship trying to become a speedboat and then becoming a ship all over again. Doesn't work that way. You've got to have a strategy. You've got to be committed to the strategy no matter what. You can't let communication be your strategy. Your strategy has to be how to win an election or how to, obliterate the effect that Modi has. So from a pure marketing perspective, you've got to understand that Modi is miles ahead. I mean, right. He knows what to do and he does it with panache. And sometimes when you do it so brazenly, the others are so taken aback that it doesn't even elicit a response from them.
So you raised a very interesting point about how Soot Boot Ki Sarkar was actually one of the very successful campaigns, and it sort of aborted that entire set of reforms that Arun Jaitley had tried to introduce, the labor reforms and the land acquisition reforms. It just completely froze them cold. So where did Soot Boot Ki Sarkar succeed, and where did Chaukidar Chor Hai fail?
Brilliant. I don't want us to be a mutually back-batting club, but brilliant question. And I'm glad you asked me this question. The Soot Boot Ki Sarkar was something that was within the purview of the 520 or 524 members of parliament, Lutyens Delhi, national media, and one tier below in terms of the media. The average common man didn't care about Soot Boot Ki Sarkar. What was Rahul Gandhi trying to do? He was saying that you thought we were in bed with corporate India. Actually, this man is in bed with corporate India. Under this man's tutelage, or under his reign or rule, you will find corporate India getting more and more cozy. So if you talk about capital cronyism, this is capital cronyism. Which stuck? It stuck with the intellectual. it stuck with the elite, the intelligentsia. Where Chaukidar Chor Hai boomeranged, was a more mass, impactful statement, and immediately Modi turned it to his advantage. Because also remember the reality of Modi's arrival to central leadership. If you go back 2012, 2013, actually 2011 to 2014 May were the worst years of trust in an Indian government. That was because of RaGa, 2G, whatever. Manmohan Singh, who I still believe is one of the most decent prime ministers we've ever had, history will judge him much better than you and I may. He got clobbered because of charges of corruption, of cronyism. Modi came at the back of a corrupt-free India. And to give Modi credit, it is unarguably the cleanest cabinet since independent India. There is no question about that. Yes, electoral bonds, but that's money going to the party. When Modi came to power, he had already established a very solid, very robust perception about the Gandhis and corruption and how their bond existed. It was almost as if corruption and Gandhis were intertwined. He just capitalized on that. He says, can you imagine? This man is calling a Chaukidar a chore. He then brought in all the security guards. He brought in the Chaukidars. He brought in the village Chaukidar. So he said, look, these guys are the entitled. Look at what they are saying about us. See, I've always said there are two people, in addition to Rahul Gandhi, who made the Congress lose two successive elections, or at least cause a dent. One was Mani Shankar Iyer when he said Chaiwala. Second was Sam Petroda's irresponsible comment when asked about October 31 to November 2, 1984, as to why the Sikh riots were not condemned. He said, hua to hua. Oh. This kind of arrogance has been taken advantage of by Narendra Modi, and rightly so. As I've said, Modi is brilliant in the craft that he employs. He knows his onions brilliantly. And he's got a brilliant backup. Congress had an outstanding lady in the form of Divya Spandana, who was handling their social media thing. Suddenly she vanished and she was replaced by someone else. So, you're not even staying the course. And I think that's his problem. His problem is he's willing to try too many concoctions and none of which work because, Abhijit, as you know this, without strategy, you can't win political games. You can't win political recognition. You need a strategy. Tactics only get you this far and no further.
So talking about, because you're the guru on this, Suhel, I was always initially told that the English press doesn't count for anything in this country. It's the vernacular press. And then I grew up a bit to realize that, a story starts off with the English financial press, moves into the English mainstream press, and then trickles down into the vernacular press because the vernacular press need this sort of recognition. They crave the English press's recognition. So, what his failure, Papu's failure is in terms of the Indian electorate has also been his success in terms of foreign media. Everybody today, every foreign outlet, right or left, says India is hurling towards fascism, authoritarianism, what have you. Why isn't that message and the intelligentsia message in Delhi, the Lutyens' message, trickling down to the vernacular media as we were told it should?
Excellent question. Again, excellent. So let's look at now what we've come to is the media environment in which both Rahul Gandhi and Narendra Modi operate. Narendra Modi, for many years, ever since Godhra happened, has one rule. He doesn't wish to engage on issues that he finds either uncomfortable, irrelevant, or prickly. Rahul Gandhi doesn't get the play that he should from national media, because you and I both know national media now is largely controlled and hugely shackled by the ruling dispensation. Whether they actually shackle them or not, but sometimes they want to be more loyal to the king than the king himself. Having said that, the foreign media is not getting any traction from the Indian government. And this is a point I made on a PGurus event or a talk many, many weeks ago. And I reiterate, the biggest failure of the Narendra Modi government is communicating with the intelligentsia. The biggest failure of the Narendra Modi government is communicating with the foreign press. They believe that it's like the George W. Bush syndrome. If you're either you're with me or against me, there's no middle path. There has been no communication from the Narendra Modi government. There's been no engagement with either the Economist. So if there's a story that comes against you, you say, oh, the Economist doesn't know what they're talking about. New York Times doesn't know what they're talking about. They're all sold. They have a leftist agenda. Now, Rahul Gandhi is the perfect foil. Because if you remember, many, many years ago, in the Reserve Bank of India press conference, the Economist representative even went to town and said that we have not been invited.
Yes.
And the RBI had not invited them. Now, it may have been a clerical error, but it seemed as if, oh, the government is against us. In an environment like that, Abhijit, you have Rahul Gandhi who's available, who's willing to say exactly what you want to hear. And sometimes the foreign press, and you know this, foreign press is clever enough to herd you in a manner to elicit a response that they believe will play well with their audiences. After all, everyone is catering to an audience. So a New York Times will largely support the nuanced stand of Rahul Gandhi because they believe that, wow, Rahul Gandhi is actually saying exactly what we've been saying. But for God's sake, he will, because he's the opposition. And Modi and his bunch of people aren't reaching out for whatever reason. And my constant advice to the government or to whoever is willing to listen to any advice is that, remember, reaching out is as important, and you have to reach out to all constituents. The problem with the BJP is they're a damn good election winning machine. They communicate brilliantly during the elections, but they're a very poor communicating machine otherwise. You know what happened during Rafale? I mean, Rahul Gandhi came with zero facts, dismissive figures, with the whole process not understood by him, and made a mockery. The government was on the back foot, as if, oh my God, we may have done something wrong. And this is a chap whose family was involved with Bofors, who managed to turn the tables on a Narendra Modi government on a government-to-government deal.
Yes.
But he managed to do that. So I'm saying, you're right. This is why I think the Modi government needs to introspect and figure how. Because see, a person from outside, if I'm sitting in New York and I'm a possible investor, yes, the India story is very attractive, blah, blah, blah. But I will worry about the divisiveness if I'm told this constantly. I will worry if I'm told there are riots. I will worry if I'm told there's a Hindu-Muslim divide. So the government needs to engage. And now you've got a person like Dr. Jaishankar, who's managing your external affairs ministry, who's an experienced diplomat. These are the people who should go out and reach out to these people.
So how do you account for the fact that during the Delhi riots, Jaishankar did not reach out to anyone? In fact, the government did not have a press conference at all. And then very churlishly, when the American Council for Religious Freedoms or whatever decides to send a fact-finding committee, puts out this very twatty kind of a tweet saying, oh, we've denied them visas. I mean, what's the point of post facto visa denial when you haven't even put your facts out on the table for the international press and for the international diplomatic corps out here? But if Jaishankar isn't doing that, and you believe that he is a good communicator, an international communicator, that means there's something wrong with the system of government then.
Absolutely. There's something wrong intrinsically with the structure. Kapil Sibal, in an interview day before yesterday, said to a lot of the TV channels that he spoke to, saying that there is a systemic or a structural issue which needs to be corrected. Also, please understand that in this government, all the stuff is left either to Narendra Modi or Amit Shah to handle. Now, it could be that no one else wants to take on the responsibility, or no one else is allowed that responsibility. But the fact is, managing India is different from managing a state. Now, you have to give Rahul credit for one or two things. Number one, Rahul has not shied away from the press. Rahul has always gone out and met the press because he knows that the opposition, in this case Modi, who's the prime minister, is not engaging with the press or is engaging with the press at on his terms and conditions. Now look at what happened in Uttar Pradesh. When Priyanka and Rahul went and they were stopped, they returned, they went back. But there's no consistency. Just when things are hotting up, just when parliament is convened, you go away from the country. Now, I will never grudge Rahul Gandhi the care that he must exude and the responsibilities he must shoulder as a son for a mother. But surely you could have gone 10 days later or 10 days earlier. And what happens, Abhijit, here is it's the sense of entitlement that we are the Gandhis, we are above parliament. We are the Gandhis, we are above scrutiny. We are the Gandhis, we are above being questioned. This above being is today hitting people because it's a different India today. It is not an India which is burdened, subjugated, or scared by entitled people. It is not an India that is looking at a hierarchical code in the sense how much money you have, how much farmland you own, blah, blah, blah. Also, people don't remember the Rajiv Gandhis and the Indira Gandhis of the world anymore. The generation that is existing today, the youngest of the young, they've not understood, Nehru the, Indira Gandhi thi, Rajiv Gandhi thi. No. They know that Gandhi is equal to entitlement. And how in the face of a democracy, how much will you stretch the irony of having a first family? And Modi's always said, कि आप नामदार हैं, मैं कामदार हूं. Means you've got the name, I have got to do the work. So if you look, even the RaGa story, and how Modi shifted the RaGa advantage to the BJP. It was a Congress idea. Actually, think about it. Half the things that the government of India today has done, including Aadhaar, was basically a Congress idea. Modi took it, spun it beautifully. I say Modi is a consummate marketer. He's been selling packaged goods, which are essential commodities, and made brands out of them. These guys created Aadhaar. He's taken the credit. Rajiv Gandhi did the advent of computers. Digital India will only be remembered for Narendra Modi, by Narendra Modi, and of Narendra Modi. So these are the tragedies. And it's playing out in front of us. And the Congress has bright people, but some of those bright people, their bulbs don't light up at the right time. So I don't even know what they're doing.
Right. So that leads us to two marketing questions then. One is the idea of India, because there seems to be a competition on the idea of India. But the second is to the 23 MPs who actually mustered the courage to write that letter to the Congress High Command. Now, given what you've said about Congress functioning best when the Gandhis don't do anything and simply act as the glue, what would your marketing assume? These 23 MPs actually formed a cabal and hired you as their messaging manager. What would you be doing for them, with them, and to them?
No, none of it would work if we didn't have Rahul Gandhi, either Rahul Gandhi's buy-in or Rahul Gandhi out of the way. Because what has happened is the Congress is willing to splinter itself in order for some people to protect the Gandhis and for the others to revolt against the Gandhis. I mean, most of these 23 people have again been reabsorbed, as it were, in the last 2 days and been placed in various committees as advising Sonia Gandhi. So the Congress knows this game. And the Congress also knows that half these 23 guys would not be able to win their own elections, but would need Congress support. So it's not as if all the grassroots people are against them. Yes, if Huda, if Sachin Pilot, even Sachin Pilot, he made half a move and back. It was like playing the worst chess move if you've got a bishop to your advantage. But that's how he did it. He didn't even make a solid move. So the point, Abhijit, is that in terms of communication, you've got to decide what you want to do. None of these 23 people is willing to resign. None of these 23 people is willing to put his head on the chopping block. They believe that in numbers will rest their strength. It never does. David Ogilvy famously said, there are no statues of committees in any parks. It's only of individuals. You will need individual grit. You'll need individual determination, individual drive, if you want to counter Rahul Gandhi. But the question is, if not him, then who? Even that they will not be able to decide on. It's very interesting, the point that you've raised. When you have a strategy of going to war, you must recognize first what is the worst case scenario and then build on the best case scenario. Amartya Sen, in The Idea of Justice, in his book, brilliantly talks about the relationship between Krishna and Arjun. And when they were going to war and they were on that chariot, Arjun asks Krishna, he says, my worry is not that I'm going to war. My worry is that in the wake of war, there will be damage, there'll be orphans, there'll be widows, there'll be carnage, there'll be destruction. And Amartya Sen then goes on to argue, which God would condone war if that God knew that his or her children would be obliterated? So, the irony places itself for us. We've got to recognize and understand, if not Rahul, then who? And it cannot be a family-run company anymore, because, and this, the family needs to be told or needs to know or needs to absorb. The family today is the biggest asset and it's the biggest liability. So if you were a good chartered accountant, you'd figure out that this is not about balancing the books. This is about preparing the Congress for the next wave. Otherwise, these folks in the BJP are going to rule for as long as we can imagine. And Narendra Modi's job is not to go out to Khan an opposition. The opposition must create or invent itself.
Right. So that's taking on from that. Everybody, all our mutual friends who know Rahul keep telling me, they've told him in as many ways as possible, this isn't working. You're not getting it right. You're shooting your mouth off at all the wrong times. You're alienating a lot of people, so on and so forth. But it never seems to get through to him. What is a message? How do you package this message to Rahul? How do you package the unpalatable to a person who simply doesn't listen?
So let's go back again in time and let's study cultures. The Italian mother culture is a very important thing. I mean, we've seen it in The Godfather in many ways, but we've seen it in life. One of the comments that Obama's made in his book is very interesting. He says that it was almost as if Sonia was trying to sell Rahul.
Yes.
That's a very telling point that Obama made. These guys have got carried away with all the other stuff. That's a very important point. The love of a mother still runs supreme and above the love for party and the love for generational shift or generational change. The tragedy is that most mothers and fathers and most parents believe that legacies have to only be carried and enshrined by their children and not by the cause that the children or the parents believe in. The Congress was created to give India independence. The Congress was created to create an independent governance system. It wasn't created to foster or to promote or to propagate one family. But what has happened over the years? The family has been venerated. I mean, it's famous. One very famous Indian actor who I will not name. When I asked him, I said, "Why don't you, make up with Sonia Gandhi?" And he says, "Ye Raja or Rank ki kahani hai." He's saying, "Rank nahi, sirf Raja तय करेगा कि कब दोस्ती फिर से कायम हो," which means it is the serf. The serf can't decide when when the king will befriend him. The king has to decide. Now, when you venerate these people to that level, and there I'll tell you, I tend to agree with everything that Modi is doing, including getting some of these artists out of their cozy government-paid bungalows. What has Modi done? He's come from the outside. He has no baggage. He has no children. He has no club to be part of. He's demolishing all the structures. And what do we love as a people? We love demolishing these structures. So what has happened today is you've got Sonia Gandhi, who had been given this house for life. Yes, security reasons, blah, blah, blah. But look at the support that Modi got when he got Priyanka Gandhi and Robert Vadra to shift out from government accommodation.
Yes.
You know why? The common man says, "Ha bhai, ye sahi banda hai." Why? Because he doesn't care about kiska naam, kiski gaadi. So that's what it's turning out to be.
But that's also a very dangerous trend that we've noticed with the Indian populace as a whole of Schadenfreude, be it bank nationalization down to getting, Rajkumari out of her bangla. But I'm going to come back to something very, very revealing, combine two very revealing things that you said. One is the path to reforming Rahul Gandhi, if at all possible, is actually to reform the mother on one hand. And the other was that, how the Congress was built for independence. It was a vehicle built for independence, and how people no longer connect with the independence struggle with Rajiv Gandhi, with Indira Gandhi, with Nehru, and all of that. So you now have two competing ideas of India. One is the BJP vision of a civilizational country with a continuity for about 5,000 years. The other is a government structure-based idea of India, that there was the Mughal Empire, then there was the British Empire, and then there was the Congress. How are you seeing the marketing for each of these play out? Because I'm not actually seeing the BJP market its idea of India as well as, say, the Congress has marketed its idea of India. And yet the BJP keeps winning elections.
Absolutely. So what the BJP is doing is they are indulging in short-termism, and they believe that they will exist from election to election. The Congress never imagined that they would start losing elections. So their persona was one of doling out largesse. Their persona was of patronage. Their persona was of giving out. Their persona was, come to us and we shall deliver. It was the deliverance vehicle. The BJP is struggling every day. Also, the BJP, I think, in a very surreptitious, very, weird kind of way, the BJP would like to be like the Congress in the suaveness, in all of that. But because they're so repulsed by their own inadequacies in that area, that they've now gone completely opposite. Having said that, I think the idea of India, there is only one idea of India. There's no Congress idea of India, and there's no BJP idea of India. And you're absolutely right. The BJP has not been able to market the idea of India. What they've marketed, or what has come out, or what has come across perceptually, is an idea of a perhaps divided India, which, by the way, it's not. On a PGurus event like this, I made the point when Sree Iyer asked me about August 5, 2020. I said, no society must make the majority feel guilty for being the majority, because then there will be a backlash. The majority will then say, why the hell are we being persecuted for being the majority? And that anger will spill out against minorities of any hue or color. So I believe that the idea of a civilizational India needs to be expanded, but it needs to be expanded academically. Ideas are not about rudimentary thuggery. Ideas are not born out of what I would call lumpen behavior or lumpen thinking. An idea of India is not about going out and slapping people and Romeo bashing around Valentine's Day. That's against us. If we genuinely believe that India is inspired from a Hindu streak of thinking, then Hinduism is a way of life. Hinduism has never felt threatened, has only absorbed the best of what cultures have had to offer in its framework. I mean, sometimes I marvel at our lack of history. Sahir Ludhianvi actually opened Nehru's eyes in Pyasa when he wrote that song, Ki Kahan Gaye Wo Log. Muhammad Rafi sang the finest bhajans. Yesudas used to stand outside the temple in the south. So we've forgotten all of that. We have now made it into a divide versus integrate. And I think over time it will change. because I do not believe that India is a country that will vote only along religious lines. To say that Hindus are voting en bloc because they are Hindus is an insult to Hinduism, is an insult to Hindus, is more importantly an insult to democratic India. I think today more and more Indians want the entitled to go away, want a country where they can harbor and actually, achieve their dreams. And all said and done, Modi has created an aspirational ecosystem which didn't exist earlier. You will laugh when I tell you this, Abhijit. After the lockdown was lifted, I asked a lot of my clients who are very senior industrialists. I said, what do you think? Some of them cribbed about the lockdown, but not one person said anything to the contrary. They all said the poorest of the poor who used to work in our plants or in the communities around the plants, each one of them got their rations. Each one of them got the funds that Modi had promised. Now, you've got to give the man some credit. But my worry is that Modi's credit is immediately snatched by the stupid utterances of his colleagues or by the inability of the government oblique the party to communicate. They've not been able to communicate the good that they've done. I mean, a simple argument about August the 5th, 2020 should have been, we in our manifesto said we will address the Ram temple issue. Everything that Modi is doing is as per what they've said in their manifesto. He's not springing a surprise on you. It's your goddamn problem you haven't read their manifesto. Yeah. So these are the realities of the political times that we live in. But Rahul has no say on all of these. And that's my worry. Rahul is divorced both as an intellectual and as a politician. Because if he was an intellectual, the intellect would have forced him to apply rigor to his utterances. If he's a politician, he'd be smart enough to make the right noise.
Right. So we're running out of time, last 5 minutes. Let's shift from Pappu to the BJP. You brought about something that I found quite disturbing and quite true, like you usually do, which is that, that insight that you gave us that the BJP is playing a very tactical game, not a strategic game. And a tactical game can always go horribly wrong in a very, very short period of time, and then there's nothing you can do about it. And in this particular case, combining with what you said earlier, that they refuse to engage with the intelligentsia. They refuse to, play that entire ecosystem game. So how do you get that intellectual sophistication, that sophistication of nuance, of verbiage and all of that through to the BJP, or at least convince them of the need for it?
I think the BJP is very smart, and it has some very smart people who are also part of the intellectual bulwark, as it were, for the BJP. Remember, the BJP has some very solid people. They just may not be the people who hang around at India International Center or go to Davos, but they're very smart people. They are deeply committed people. They are deeply committed not only to the idea of civilizational India, they're deeply committed to the idea of deep down, rock bottom reform. Those are the people that must be given more courage, more impetus, and must be given more power to communicate. The point I'm making, Abhijit, is that there is no communication strategy. It's a typical story of Operation Successful, Patient Dead. The BJP has an armory, it has the ammunition, it even has the snipers. But the tragedy is they don't use them all the time. And they use them in a very haphazard, inconsistent manner, which needs to change. Because if that doesn't change, then the BJP will always be remembered for the wrong reasons. And I don't want to, but I must paraphrase what William Shakespeare said. And in two parts, in Julius Caesar. And he says that when Mark Antony asked Brutus, why did you stab Caesar? He says, it's not that I loved Caesar less, but I loved Rome more.
Yeah.
And then is the famous thing. The good is oft interred with the bones, the evil lives long after. My worry is that the fault lines of the BJP, sometimes created by their allies or stupid utterances, will stick to the BJP rather than all the good. And there's a lot of good that they've done. And that good began under Atalji. It began under Atal Bihari Vajpayee, who was not only sagacious, statesman-like, but a man who embraced the qualities of both opposing intellect as well as embrace the idea of an integrated India. And I don't think these people are that diametrically opposite. But somehow this whole hawkish, tough image gives rise to fear. And remember one thing, Abhijit, societies are always built around the idea of affection, around the idea of absorption, never around the idea of fear or of subjugation. You can suppress, subjugate a people only for this long and no longer.
True. Well, Suhel, that was a wonderful conversation. I hope you had as much fun as
you asked some really, truly outstanding questions. And, thank you for asking them.
Please allow me to ask one question from a viewer and then we can wind it up. The question is for Suhel. Should India, United States set up a military base in the Indian Ocean?
Now, okay. I have to admit, there are a lot of things that I know, but there are more things that I don't know. And this is something that I don't have a clue about. Abhijit writes on defense matters. Let him answer that question.
Abhijit?
This program is about Suhel. I'll answer that separately at some other time, but this is to showcase Suhel. So let's leave it there. And Suhel, Kalpana Brijnath sends her love to Lakshmi. So there.
Oh, excellent.
Okay, so you have given us the topic for the next hangout with you, Abhijit. And Suhel, as always, it's a pleasure having you, man. You are an articulate person. You should be more often on PGurus. And this conversation, I promise you guys, I'll get this technology figured out. And next time it will be more of Abhijit while he is asking the questions. I really, really apologize humbly to my viewers that we tried something for the first time and we almost got it off. For the first 5 minutes, there was some echo, but after that, everything settled down fine. Thanks once again for your support. We had the highest viewers watching this program today ever in the history of PGurus. So I thank you both, Abhijit and Suhel, and once again, namaskar, thank you very much, and we'll be back with more such interesting conversations. I tell you, today Rahul Gandhi had so much takeaway. I hope somebody close to him watches this thing, listens to Suhel, and see what are the things he can do. And also for the party, the gang of 23, guys, you are being stripped naked. For God's sake, stand up, show some spine, show some leadership, take this country forward. The country needs a healthy democracy. For that, two parties have to be healthy. That's my hope. And once again, thank you very much.
Thank you.